She said she wouldn't talk to her ex again, but I saw her in the reflection of his sunglasses on Instagram. I met Sarah at a friend's rooftop dinner party in the spring. I still remember the way she was curled up on a lounge chair, wrapped in a beige cardigan, sipping wine like she had nowhere better to be. She smiled at me the way only people who've already decided they like you, and somehow, within a week, we were a thing. Not casually dating, not seeing how it goes. We were a thing. She had this effortless confidence like she'd already lived 5 lives before me. Smart, fast-talking, kind in a way that made you want to be better, but also chaotic. She lost her phone constantly, cried watching documentaries about elephants, left sticky notes with doodles all over my fridge, my laptop, even once in my sock. I found myself falling for her in quiet ways. Cleaning up after her messes didn't feel like a chore. It felt like purpose. But early on, there was one boundary she set with steel precision. My ex, she said, the word sharp like it had been lodged in her throat too long, is off limits. Please don't ask questions. Don't bring him up. I've erased him from everything, and I want to keep it that way. I didn't ask for details. I told myself that everyone has a history, and if she wasn't in contact with him, what did it matter? What I didn't expect was the degree to which that history shadowed our present. There were moments that didn't add up, like how she still had this random silver bracelet she wore every day, even though it didn't match her usual style, or how she once flinched when a certain song came on the radio, or the time she left the room during a conversation with friends because someone brought up a vacation to Tulum and she turned pale. But I respected her boundary. Too much, maybe. The first crack came about 6 months in. She started pulling away. Not in grand ways, just in those micro shifts you can't quite prove. She stopped grabbing my hand while crossing the street. Stopped texting me those silly updates during the day. She started staying up late, scrolling through her phone in the bathroom with the door half shut, and I'd hear her whispering sometimes, then silence when I walked by. One night, I asked her, "You okay lately? You've seemed distant." She blinked twice like she wasn't expecting me to notice. "Just work stress," she said, "and PMS. I'm sorry." I kissed her forehead and said nothing. I didn't want to be that guy. The one who accuses, nags, questions. She hated jealous men, hated the idea of being controlled. "That's what he did," she once said. "He made me feel like I owed him a constant report of my day." I didn't want to be him, so I didn't ask again. Weeks passed, then months. Things got better, sort of. Or maybe I just convinced myself they had. Then, it happened. A random Tuesday afternoon, I was killing time on Instagram. I don't usually doom scroll, but I was waiting on edits from a client and bored. That's when I saw it. A story, posted maybe 10 minutes before from a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Jason. I'd forgotten I still followed. He was never my friend, but we had mutual. I'd met him once or twice. He had the charm of someone who knows everyone's watching. The kind of guy who takes up all the oxygen in a room and still makes you thank him for breathing. The story was just a selfie. Him in a car, music playing, smirking like usual, but I don't know what made me stop and stare. Maybe it was the feeling in my gut. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was the reflection in his mirrored sunglasses, barely distinguishable but unmistakably her. Sarah, her side profile, hair tied up, the way her hand rested on her cheek, the chipped blue polish on her thumbnail, the sunlight catching her earring. It wasn't a guess. I knew it was her. My breath caught. I replayed the story, paused it, zoomed in, screenshotted. Denial was immediate. Maybe it was old. Maybe she'd been in his car months ago and he was recycling content. But no, there was a timestamp on the music, a new song, just released this week. He always posted the most current things. That story was fresh. I sat there, gripping my phone like it might break in my hand. My head felt hot, my chest hollow. I wanted to text her right then and there. What the hell is this? But I didn't. I waited for her to come home like normal, waited to see if she'd lie to my face. She came in a few hours later, humming, tossing her keys on the counter. "Hey babe," she said, leaning over to kiss me. I didn't kiss back. She noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone. No words. Just the image. The way her face drained of color was instant, like I'd thrown cold water in it. "Sarah," I said finally, "is this you?" She blinked, swallowed. "What is this? You know what this is. Answer me." "That's not..." She stopped. "That's not what it looks like." I laughed. Not out of amusement, but because it was so cliche. I almost couldn't believe she said it. "It looks like you in the passenger seat of the man you swore you weren't talking to." Silence. She bit her lip. "I can explain. Try." And that's when the unraveling began. "Запитати в чат GPT. Ви сказали. Частина друга програма ChatGPT сказала." Here is part 2 of 6 of the story, continuing directly from the confrontation, approximately 5,000 characters. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there, her mouth open slightly, like she couldn't decide whether to start with a lie or the truth. I watched the storm in her eyes spin in every direction. Rage, guilt, fear, maybe even relief. Relief that she'd been caught, that she didn't have to hold it any. "I didn't plan it," she finally said, her voice low. "I ran into him. That's all." "Where?" I asked. "Because you don't run into someone like him by accident." She sat down on the edge of the couch like her knees had buckled. "At Monica's birthday, he was there. I didn't know he'd be invited. You said you weren't going to that." "I didn't plan to. But I went last minute." "And just, what? Slipped into his passenger seat for a quick catch-up?" She didn't answer that. "I told you," I said. My voice quieter now. I told you all I ever needed from you was honesty. That was the one thing I asked. She covered her face with her hands. I wasn't trying to hide it. It was just, he asked me if I wanted to grab coffee. Just to talk. To get closure. Closure. That word has ruined more people than betrayal ever could. Closure? I repeated. You want to sit here and tell me that after all the speeches you gave me about how toxic he was, how manipulative, how controlling, you thought you'd get closure in his car? I don't know what I thought, she said, her voice cracking now. I didn't expect to feel anything. I don't know. I thought maybe it would feel like taking back power, like being able to look at him and feel nothing. And instead, it got messy. I stared at her, trying to process the emotional acrobatics it must have taken to justify all this in her mind. Not once, but over and over. To get in the car, to talk, to let him take a photo knowing full well who might see it, who she used to be, who we were. Did you kiss him? I asked. She didn't answer. Sarah, no, she said quickly. Too quickly. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She opened her mouth again, then closed it. I don't know. I just know that it spiraled. Spiraled. Like she tripped and fell face first into her ex's passenger seat. I trusted you, I said quietly. Not because I was naive. Not because I didn't know better, but because I wanted to believe that this time, I didn't have to protect myself. She started crying. Quiet, not dramatically. Just tears sliding down like she couldn't stop them, even if she wanted to. And part of me wanted to hold her. Even then, part of me still loved her, and I hated that. I didn't sleep with him, she whispered. That's not the point, I snapped. The point is that I asked you if there was anything left between you two. You looked me in the eye and said no. You swore it. And the whole time what? You were just waiting for the right excuse? No, she said, suddenly desperate. I didn't want anything to happen, but it did, okay? He was there and he was him, and I got pulled in. Pulled in? I echoed, disgusted. Like a riptide? She looked at me helplessly, her face flushed and streaked with tears. You don't understand what he does to people. No, I said bitterly. I think I understand exactly what he does. The silence in the room was unbearable. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. She reached for me as I passed. Please, don't go. You already made that choice for both of us, I said, pulling my arm away. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. Not because I needed sleep. I knew I wouldn't sleep a second. But because I needed the wall. The physical barrier between her and me. Between the person I thought she was and the one she just revealed herself to be. For the next few days, we barely spoke. She tried, of course. Made breakfast. Left notes. Sent long texts while I was out. They always started the same. I know I messed up, or please just let me explain again. But the words never fixed any. Not this time. The trust was gone. It didn't shatter like glass. It dissolved, slow and acid-like, into something I couldn't pick up any. I started remembering everything different. Her smiles now looked manipulative in my memory. Her quiet nights on the balcony scrolling, were they to him? Her long showers? Her sudden mood shifts? I spiraled in my own head, retracing every moment that once felt tender and now felt like evidence. And she saw it happening, saw the change in my eyes, the distance in my voice. I never stopped loving you, she said one night, while we stood in the kitchen like strangers. Even if I was confused, even if I did something unforgivable, I never stopped loving you. I looked at her and said nothing. Because love wasn't the question anymore. The question was whether I could ever look at her again and not see that reflection. The tiny, blurry version of her in someone else's sunglasses, etched permanently into my memory. That's when I knew we weren't going to make it. Even if we stayed together, we were broken. And some fractures don't heal. Some stay jagged enough to cut you again every time you run your hand over them. She didn't move out right away. I think part of her still believed we could patch it, that if she played it slow, if she let time do the work, I'd soften, I'd forget. But forgetting is a choice you have to make, and I hadn't even begun to consider forgiveness. She left post-it notes on the fridge again, just like the beginning, except this time they weren't doodles of cats in hats or terrible puns. They were apologies, little confessions. I should have told you. I didn't want to lose you. I messed up, I know. Every time I opened the fridge, I saw her guilt written in pink ink. I stopped reading them after the 4th day. I couldn't live like that, trapped in the limbo of pretending we were still us. Eating meals in silence. Sharing a bed like cellmates. Avoiding eye contact because it was too heavy with everything we weren't saying. Eventually, she offered to stay at her sister's for a while. She said it carefully, like a surgeon making the first cut. Just for a few days. Give you space. I didn't protest. I watched her pack a duffel bag. Her hands moved slowly, like they were afraid of admitting this was real. She didn't take much. Toothbrush, charger, jeans. A hoodie I used to wear that she never gave back. I stood by the door while she zipped the bag shut. She looked up at me and asked, "Is this it?" And I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell that of course this is it. That she'd lied. That she'd betrayed the one sacred agreement we had. That I could never unsee her reflection in his sunglasses. Not in a million lifetimes. But all I said was, I don't know, because I didn't. Because part of me still loved her, still saw her as the girl who once drew smiley faces on coffee cups and snuck chocolate into my backpack before big meetings. The girl who once danced in my living room barefoot, tipsy, wearing my hoodie. She left without another word, and the apartment was suddenly too quiet. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, and stared at the empty half, the dent where her body had shaped the mattress, the faint lavender smell on the pillow. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting silence press against my chest like a weight. I scrolled through my phone, deleted our pictures together. Then I made a mistake. I went to Jason's Instagram again. I know. I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. Curiosity has teeth when it's fueled by betrayal. His stories were gone, but his profile was public. And right there, 2 scrolls down, was a photo from the same day. Not a selfie this time, a full-body mirror shot in a gas station. He was smirking, phone in hand, and behind him, just barely, was her, looking at snacks. Face turned away, but her. She hadn't just been in the car. She had spent the day with him, and maybe she thought she could frame it as a moment of weakness. A brief encounter, a slip. But this was different. This was time. This was effort. This was choice. I stared at that photo for a long time, long enough to feel something shift inside me. I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry, not the kind of angry that shouts or smashes things. The kind that burns quietly, the kind that simmers under your skin and makes everything look clearer. I grabbed my camera from the shelf, the one I hadn't touched since she left. It felt heavy, real, like something I still knew how to hold. And I left the apartment. I walked the city for hours, took pictures of everything that made me feel something. Cracked sidewalks, empty swings, neon signs that flickered out halfway through a word. Loneliness in concrete. I found myself documenting grief without even realizing. By the time I got home, the sky was bleeding into early morning, and I had 24 shots that made my chest ache in a good way, like pulling glass from a wound. Painful, but healing. The next few weeks were slow. She texted sometimes. Once she sent a voice memo, her voice thick with tears. I know you don't want to hear from me. I get it. But I just wanted to say I miss you. Not because I'm lonely, because I miss us. The way we laughed, the way you looked at me like I was safe. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't feel something, but because I couldn't trust what I felt. Love can be a liar when it's desperate. Instead, I kept taking pictures. Turned my grief into a project. Called it Reflections. Every shot had a reflection. Windows, mirrors, puddles. People half seen. Distorted. The idea was simple. We think we know what we're looking at, but it's always just a version of the truth. The irony wasn't lost on me. I submitted it to a local gallery. Didn't think much would come of it until they called me back, said they wanted to feature it, said it was raw, honest, said it made people feel things. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled without guilt. Then, 3 days before the exhibit opened, I got another text from her. No words. Just a photo. A mirror selfie. She was wearing my hoodie again, and in the caption, I'm still trying to find the version of me you saw. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, feeling the universe pull one last cruel trick. Because in that moment, I realized I didn't miss her. I missed the reflection of who she'd pretended to be. The gallery night arrived faster than I expected. I almost canceled. There was this part of me, still bruised, still bleeding, that didn't think I deserved the recognition. Like grief had become my co-artist, and maybe I hadn't actually created any, just held the camera while pain did the work. But I went. I wore the only blazer I owned, brushed the dust off my boots, stared at my reflection in the mirror longer than I should have. The place was packed. Not crowded in a chaotic way, but full, warm. People leaned close to the photos, arms folded, heads tilted, mouths slightly parted like they were trying to decode something deeper than light and shadow. I stood in a corner, half hiding, watching strangers react to my story without knowing they were part of it. Some cried, some whispered. One guy took a picture of one of my photos on his phone, and I almost told him to stop, but then I realized I didn't mind. Let it be carried. Let it float away and belong to someone else. That night, a woman named Kay approached me. She looked like she belonged in a different city. Red lipstick, sharp bob haircut, a confidence that filled the space before she even spoke. You're the photographer, she said, not asked. I nodded. Guilty, she smiled. Your work reminds me of Nan Golden. If Nan was raised in Midtown and listened to Bon Iver on loop, I laughed. For the first time in what felt like months, it didn't sound forced. We talked. About art, about loneliness, about why broken things are easier to capture than whole ones. I didn't tell her about Sarah. Didn't need to. It was in the walls already. Before she left, Kay looked at me and said, You see people in their most unguarded, but I think you're still hiding behind the lens. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed staring at the sea. Her words echoed. Maybe she was right. Maybe I hadn't really processed anything. I just frozen it in time. Behind glass. The next morning, I did something stupid. I opened Sarah's Instagram. I hadn't looked in weeks. Maybe months. She had a new profile picture. Shorter hair, blonder, brighter. Her feed looked curated now. Less chaos, more aesthetics. Lattes and yoga pants and golden retrievers. Like she was trying to rebrand her heartbreak. And then I saw it. A post from 5 days ago. Her, at the beach. Wind in her hair. Eyes closed. And in the comments, Jason Brooks. Some things are meant to circle back. Sarah L. Not everything is a circle. Some things just never stop. I dropped my phone. Not in rage. Not even in sadness. Just numbness. So it wasn't just coffee. It wasn't closure. They were together. Publicly. Casually. like none of it had cost anything. I felt the heat crawl up my spine. It wasn't the betrayal it was the audacity. To act like we were just a blip. To treat our story like some disposable interlude between chapters. To make me the detour on her way back to the man she once described as a parasite with a Spotify playlist. I wanted to message her. Not to fight, not to beg, but to tell her that she didn't get to rewrite history. But I didn't. I powered off my phone. I sat down with a notebook, and for the first time since it all began, I wrote everything out. Not captions, not artist statements. Everything. How we met, how she laughed, how she lied, how I loved her in a way that made me ignore my own instinct, how I waited for the other shoe to drop, and then blamed myself when it did. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the pages curled from ink and sweat. And when I stopped, I felt something I hadn't felt in ages. Clarity. She didn't ruin me. She revealed me. She cracked open something inside that had been buried under years of being the calm, the forgiving, the guy who always gave the benefit of the doubt. I wasn't him anymore, and maybe that wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was evolution. The next few days were quiet. I didn't hear from her, didn't want to. Instead, I focused on the next project. Something softer, something lighter. I started taking portraits of people smiling. Not fake ones, but the kind you catch right before the pose. The in-between. The vulnerability. And then, one night, as I was editing, I got an email. Subject, request. It was from her. Just one line. Can I be photographed by you? One last time. No punctuation. No explanation. Just that. I stared at it for a long time because I knew what she meant. She wasn't asking for a picture. She was asking to be remembered, to be captured the way I once saw her. Not as the girl who broke me, but as the girl who, for a moment, felt like home. I didn't reply that night. I didn't sleep either, and I couldn't stop wondering if I agreed, would I be healing or reopening the wound I barely stitched shut? I didn't answer her, not for 2 days. I read it over and over, trying to decide if it was an apology in disguise, a trap, or something worse, a nostalgia grenade designed to blow up the progress I'd made. But the truth was, I wasn't as invincible as I wanted to be. There was still a part of, maybe a small, pathetic part, that wanted to see her again. Not to rekindle anything, not to forgive, just to look her in the eye and confirm that she was real, that she had actually existed outside of my memory, outside the reflections and the edits and the wreckage. So I said yes. One word, no greeting, no sign-off, just okay. She replied with a date, a time, and a location. The park where we'd had our first picnic, a place we hadn't returned to since that day. Back when things were still soft and hopeful and stupid. I showed up 10 minutes early, had my camera bag slung over my shoulder, even though I hadn't packed much, just the essentials. She was already there, sitting on the same weathered bench beneath the willow trees, wearing a navy sweater I didn't recognize. Her hair was even shorter than her Instagram photo. She looked older, not in a bad way, just like she'd been through things. We didn't hug. She stood as I approached, but neither of us reached out. Hi, she said, voice barely above the wind. Hey, we stared at each other for a Then, wordlessly, I pulled the camera out. She nodded, like she understood that whatever talking we might do would come after the shutter. She sat back down, looked to the side, closed her eyes. I began to shoot. Click. She sat with her hands folded, fidgeting. Click. She turned toward me. Click. And that's when she whispered, I didn't mean to fall back into him. I lowered the camera, but I didn't say anything. I wanted her to fill the space, not me. She kept going. It wasn't like I saw him and everything came rushing back. It was more like I was afraid I'd never feel wanted again. And he made me feel that way. For a minute, I could feel the familiar ache crawl back into my throat. But I stayed still. I thought I hated him, she continued. But I think I hated myself for letting him have that power, for needing it. And I used you like a cat, like something to hold me up until I didn't feel broken. I finally spoke. You didn't use me. You just didn't see me. She flinched, and maybe that hurt more than anything else, knowing that I had been invisible to the person I gave everything to. Do you still love me? She asked, not looking at me. I pressed the shutter again. Click. I don't know, I said. Some days I think I miss you. Other days, I realize I'm just mourning the version of you that never really existed. She swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. That version existed. At least for me. In the beginning, I sat down beside her. We didn't touch. Just sat there, two people with too much history and not enough future. Why did you ask for this? I asked. She wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Because I wanted to be seen again. Not liked, not followed, not pitied. Just seen. The way you used to see me. Click. I took one last photo. Not posed. Not pretty. Just her. Eyes glassy, lips trembling, sweater wrinkled, hair windblown. And I knew I'd never take another like it again. She stood up first. I won't contact you again, she said. I needed this. Closure. For real this time. I nodded. Thank you, she said, and then hesitated. And I'm sorry. I let her walk away. Didn't watch her go. Didn't look back. When I got home that night, I uploaded the photos. There were about a dozen that technically worked. Well lit, framed, emotionally raw. But I only kept one. The last one. I didn't post it anywhere. Didn't include it in a project or label it with a title. I just saved it to a folder named Unpublished. Because some endings aren't meant for galleries. Some stories are only ever meant to be remembered. Weeks passed. The message never came. And for once, I didn't wait. I moved through life the way people do after a long illness, cautiously at first, testing each day like a step on ice. But over time, I stopped holding my breath. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, like air after a storm. I finished the Reflections exhibit, sold 3 prints, was invited to speak on a panel about emotional storytelling in photography. I stood on a stage in front of strangers talking about how sometimes the most honest image isn't the one that's sharp, but the one that catches a truth by accident. They nodded like they understood. Some of them probably did. I found new rhythms. Woke up early, started jogging, cooked again. Not just microwave meals, but real food, stuff that required cutting and simmering and patience. I even adopted a cat from a rescue shelter, named him Hugo. He follows me from room to room like he's worried I'll disappear. And I think that's what healing really looks like. Not fireworks, not revenge or transformation montages. Just quiet continuity, just showing up for yourself over and over until it stops feeling like a performance. One day, I got a message from Kay, the woman from the gallery. She said she'd seen new shots of mine online and wanted to know if I was open to collaborating on a project about urban loneliness. I said yes. Not because I was ready for anything romantic, but because I liked the way she saw the world, sharp edges softened by empathy. We grabbed coffee at a bookstore cafe, talked about the photos she wanted to curate, talked about strangers, about connections that don't last but still leave an imprint. She asked if Reflections had been about a breakup. I didn't lie. I told her, yeah. The kind that makes you question who you are without the other person. She didn't pry, just nodded slowly and said, that's the most honest kind. I think that's when I realized something. Sarah wasn't the villain of my story. She was just the wrong person with the right kind of damage. We loved each other the way broken things love, desperately, briefly, and too much in the wrong direction. She needed validation. I needed peace. And in trying to give each other what we didn't have, we both lost what we did. But that didn't make her, and it didn't make me stupid. It just made us human. The photo I took of her that last day, I looked at it again, not to reopen the wound, but to confirm that it had healed. And it had. I no longer saw the girl who betrayed. I saw someone trying to find herself in a mirror she'd already cracked. And maybe that's what we all are. Reflections, distorted by love, guilt, memory. Maybe we all spend our lives trying to see ourselves clearly in the people we love. Some give us a window, others only a shimmer in the surface. And some just show us what we don't want to become. I don't know if Sarah is still with him. I don't check anymore. Because now when I pick up my camera, I'm not looking for proof that someone saw me. I'm looking for the next image that shows I see myself. And maybe that's the best kind of closure there is.